What's up, guys? Well, welcome to today's live training. I am super pumped about today. We are talking about building muscle with weight training phases. Okay, now it's a pretty nerdy topic, and so I'm going to try to put it in layman's terms and do it as much as possible. So let's just get right into it. What we're going to cover specifically, we're going to cover three specific things. Number one, what are phases and why should we use them? Okay, number one. Number two, what are the actual phases that we need to use and the details of what these phases are? And then number three, some common mistakes that I see a lot of people making, especially more recently than they used to be 10 years ago because of the rise of certain types of exercise programs. So those are the three things that we're really going to discuss today, and we're going to dive right into it. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay. So we're going to start off first with what we need to know. Okay. Again, I'm trying to not make this nerdy. I have a lot of things going on in my head. Number one, we got to understand that your body, when it comes to weight training, okay, I'm not talking about cardio. I'm not talking about, running outside or doing the stair mill or doing this combo weight training, cardio, F45, CrossFit stuff. I'm not talking about that, but we're talking about just weight training by itself, going to the gym, lifting weights, going to your garage, lifting weights, that type of stuff. Okay. So number one, this goes all the way across the board. Your body will adapt to an exercise routine between 4 to 6 weeks of following that thing. Okay. So if you go to the gym and you do the same machines every time you go in, you do the same number of reps every time you go in, or you're doing the same spin class or whatever, your body is eventually going to adapt to that in 4 to 6 weeks. Now, being adapted is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's actually staying adapted. And that's really where the real issue comes in. We'll get there here in a second. Okay. When your body adapts to that particular workout, then the changes that you're going to see in your body are going to be very, very little. And in some cases, you'll actually stop seeing results altogether. You might phrase it as, oh, my body has plateaued. So when your body adapts to it, your body's no longer going to see changes. Now, you might see changes, but they might be very minimal, but we definitely don't want to get to that point of staying adapted. Okay. Now, your body will adapt to a lot of different things. Okay. Obviously, it'll adapt to the number of sets you're doing. It'll adapt to the number of reps you're doing. It'll adapt to your lifting speed. It'll adapt to the rest time that you have. It'll adapt to your muscle splits. It'll adapt to the actual exercises that you're doing. Okay. So if you're doing those same things all the time, or you're just changing one thing, let's just say you're changing the exercises. Well, that's one of the things that your body will adapt to. Your body will adapt to all that other stuff as well. So you have to take a deeper look into all the different variables of your particular program. Okay. And what you also need to know is that getting stronger, building muscle, having more endurance, those are all separate goals. Okay. I know a lot of times when people start lifting weights or they start, exercising, they want to get stronger, get more muscle, have more endurance, and they want to do it all at the same time. But those are actually all separate goals, and they should be attacked in different ways. Okay. Now that one thing, knowing that those are all separate goals, a lot of times that is kind of mind-blowing for people, because people didn't know that. They thought that, oh, if I just lift weights, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to get bigger, I'm going to get faster, or I'm going to have more endurance, or whatever the case is, right? They think they're doing all of it, but they're actually all separate goals. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. Okay. So that's what we have to know before we keep going. Okay. Now, why should we use these phases? Why is it important to use these phases? Number one, it keeps our body from staying adapted. Okay. So again, getting adapted to a particular workout program is actually not a bad thing. Okay. That's actually a sign like, hey, this particular workout program has run its course, but staying adapted is really the issue. Okay. So getting adapted, not a big deal. Staying adapted, that's the huge deal. In fact, in a lot of cases, my particular clients, whether it's my lifestyle clients or my high achievers, or even some of my fitness competitors, I want their body to get adapted to a particular workout, because that is their body telling me, hey, it's time to change. It's time to do something. Okay. So that's number one, why we want to do phases, right? Because we want to allow ourselves, our body to see the results of this particular workout, and then we change it to keep our body from staying adapted. Okay. Number two, the other reason to do phases is because we can focus on one specific goal. Okay. Now keep in mind, I said earlier that getting stronger and building more muscle, those are two different goals. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. Okay. Those are two different goals. They are not the same goal. And if they're not the same goal, then the process to achieve those things are completely different. Just like gaining more endurance. That's a different goal than getting stronger. That's a different goal than getting bigger muscles. Okay. Those are all different goals. So they all need to be attacked in a completely different way. So using phases allows us to focus on one of those things, getting stronger, getting more endurance, muscle building. Okay. That's the importance of doing phases and using phases. Okay. So we with using phases, we're allowed to be way more intentional with our training, way more focused on what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. Most of the time, I'm not even going to get into the common mistakes yet. We're going to get into the common mistakes here in just a second. Okay. So that's why we want to use the phases, because it allows us to be more focused and more intentional on what we're doing. Okay. The other reason to use phases is because the textbook oftentimes says that if you do this particular phase, let's say it's a strength phase, there's a certain number of reps and sets and amount of weight that you should be using, and all these different protocols that you should be using to get stronger, right? But sometimes when people's bodies go through that type of protocol, they may not get stronger. They might build muscle. Right? So by going through all these different phases, you get to see what your body truly responds to. The clients that I've been working with for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, okay, we can break it down and we know exactly what this style of lifting or how many reps that their body actually responds to gain muscle, to get stronger, to build more endurance, to develop more power. Okay. We know exactly what their sets and reps are because every single person is different. Now, most people are going to fit what the textbook says, but every now and again, people's bodies are a little different. And I would probably guess that on most of y'all, there's going to be some things that don't necessarily follow by the textbook. So by using phases, you really get to see how your body truly does respond to it. Okay. Let's talk about this for a second. Let's just talk about some common mistakes that I see people make. Okay. Now, obviously, one of the most common mistakes that I see people make is they don't ever change their workout, right? They are always going into the gym. They're always doing the exact same thing, and they're doing the same machines. They're doing the same number of reps, and they just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. Okay. And their body's not getting anywhere. Okay. Well, it's because you need to change it. Your body is probably adapted to that thing. Now, I would say probably the most common mistake that I see happening right now is people changing their workout too often. Okay. And I'm going to blame P90X for this. Okay. So there's this word that is not a scientific word, but people have run with it like it's a scientific word. Muscle confusion, right? P90X is who really kind of took it to that next level of getting people to say, oh, muscle confusion. And so, yes, muscle confusion is basically your body adapting to an exercise program. Okay. But they took it to an extreme. Okay. Now with what they did, and what you see a lot of these, whether it's CrossFit, F45, Orange Theory, or whatever, they literally change the exercise program every single time that you come in, and you're doing something different every single time. Okay. And that is, they're like, oh, we're just trying to confuse the muscle so you get more results out of it. And the problem is your body, you never allow yourself to really get good at anything, because one day you're doing, this exercise for this number of reps. The next day you're doing a completely different exercise and doing that number of reps, and your body just isn't getting good at it. Right. As you know, anytime you introduce a new exercise to your routine, you're probably pretty bad at it the first time, right? You're probably not very good. There's a little bit of a learning curve to understand how to get it done. And it usually might take a week or two for you to really feel of practicing that particular exercise, for you to feel like, okay, now I've got it. And then once you feel like you've got the technique down, then it usually takes another 2 to 3 weeks before you really max out on the amount of weight that you can be doing on that exercise. So just that one exercise, it took you 4 or 5 weeks, just depending on your level and what exercise it is. But it took you anywhere between 4 or 5 weeks before you maxed out the amount of weight that you could possibly do. Okay. Now, if you're always going in and you're doing a different workout every single time that you lift weights, you're doing different exercises, different rep ranges, different everything, you're never allowing your body to ever get good at anything. And so you're not really, you probably won't get any stronger. You probably won't develop any more endurance. You probably won't develop more muscle, because you're just changing it way too much too often. Now, that's a great thing if you're bored all the time and you don't, you get bored easily or whatever. That's great for that. But if you're working out because you want to see physical changes, then you can't just take the shotgun approach of just changing it every single time that you go in because you get bored. Okay. Focus on solving one problem at a time. Let's focus on first solving your physical issues. And then once we solve the physical issues, then maybe we can focus on solving the boredom issues, right? Now, if you just want to focus on solving the boredom issues and that's all that matters to you, then fantastic. That's your goal. But if you're changing your workout all the time and you're getting frustrated because you're not seeing physical changes, it's probably because you're changing it way too often, way too much. And I'll be honest with you, that is probably the biggest issue that I see going on right now with most people's workouts, is changing it way too often. If you're a client of mine, you know that I allow you to get really, really, really good at a particular exercise, particular routine, a particular rep range, right? And once you get really good at it and you've maxed it out, guess what? It's already time to change our next thing. So you're actually working on getting stronger, okay? Or you're working on building more endurance, or you're actually doing something. You're actually trying to work on. Imagine if every single day you went into work and you had a different job. Okay, think about that. You went into work every single day and you had a different job. Okay, could you ever really be good at all of those jobs if every single day you're doing a different job? I'm not saying that your day changes from here to here. I'm saying you literally, like, you go in one day, you're a mailman. The next day you go in, you're a teacher. The next day you go in and you're a woodworker, right? Like, it's just too much change. Okay, we need to do one thing for a while, get good at it, and then when our body adapts to it, we need to change it. So changing it too often is a really, really, really bad thing. Okay, we definitely don't want to change it way too often. Okay, one of the other mistakes that I see, and it just kind of goes again with changing it too often, is I see people just doing random rep ranges just for the sake of change, right? They just, like, they don't even know, like, okay, well, today I did 5 reps and then tomorrow I'm going to do 30. Right. Or, I really want to tone, so I'm going to do more reps in lighter weight or whatever. And they're just changing the rep ranges just randomly, just for the sake of change, just for the sake of doing something. Okay. I see a lot of people, and I think I mentioned this already. I see a lot of people trying to get stronger, trying to build muscle, trying to get more endurance, trying to get more power, all at the same time, right? They say, okay, well, I want to get stronger. I want to have bigger muscles. I want to have more endurance, and I want to do it in this workout. Okay. And you can't do that. Okay. Again, all of those are completely different workouts. So let's go ahead and talk about that for a second, because this is super important for you to know. Okay. Now, in order for you to build muscle, okay, the idea, now I'm going to get nerdy for a second, so stay with me here. Okay. In order for you to build muscle, okay, in order for you to get to that point, there is a certain number of reps and sets and and all that good stuff. But physiologically, what you're actually trying to do is you're trying to damage as many muscle fibers as you possibly can. And you don't want to let them fully recover and rest, because the more that they don't recover fully, the more your body has to go out and recruit more muscle fibers, which means the more muscle you will damage, or the more muscle fibers you will damage. The more muscle fibers you damage, the more growth you will have. Okay. So let me just say that in plain English. When you're trying to build muscle, what you're trying to do is you're trying to damage as many muscle fibers as you possibly can. You do that with the amount of weight that you're lifting, and you do that with restricting the rest. Okay. I'll give you some quick stats. In order for your muscle to recover to about 90% full recovery, let's just say you do bicep curls. Okay. Just give you that. In order for it to recover to 90% of full recovery, you need to rest 2 minutes in between each set. Okay. In order for you to rest, or excuse me, recover to 100%, you need about 5 minutes of recovery before that muscle is fully recovered, meaning that all the muscle fibers that you just worked have got the energy back in them again. Okay. And you can actually go use that. Okay. Now, if you don't allow your muscles to fully recover, right, where you use those muscle fibers again, if you don't allow your muscles to fully recover, they're going to go out and recruit more muscle fibers because they need a lot of muscle fibers to lift the weight. And if you don't allow those muscles to fully recover, they will go out and recruit more muscle fibers. And so the way that you get bigger muscles is by damaging more muscle fibers. And the more muscle fibers you damage, the bigger your muscle will grow. Okay. So getting bigger, having bigger muscles is not about strength. It's not necessarily even about endurance. It has a little bit to do with both. Okay. But it's really about, at the end of the day, it's about how many muscle fibers you can actually damage in that particular workout. And I say damage in a positive way, right? Not in a bad way. Not like you're tearing your muscles and split them apart. Okay. So that is muscle building. Okay. Now, muscle strength is completely different. Muscle strength is all about how many muscle fibers your brain can actually recruit to fire at one time. Okay. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you're going to have big muscles. Okay. Go look at these Olympic weightlifters, right? Some of them are 135 pounds and they're lifting 3 and 4 times their body weight. Okay. 135 pounds. You look at them. Yeah, they're lean and they're shredded, but they don't have huge muscles, right? They don't have huge muscles. Why? Because they have focused on recruiting as many muscle fibers as they can to contract at one time. Okay. So imagine this like strength. Okay. So strength is this. I'm going to give you an analogy that'll tell you the difference between strength and muscle building. Okay. So imagine this. Imagine that you have a 300-pound table. I'm just going to make this up. You have a 300-pound table and you have 10 guys who are all standing around the table. Okay. And you are the foreman. You are telling them what to do. Okay. So you are the brain. Okay. And those guys around the table are the actual muscle fibers. Okay. And then the table is actually the weight that you're lifting. Okay. So I am strong if I, as the foreman, am able to get all 10 of those guys to lift at one time. Because if I can get all 10 of those guys to lift at one time, I am going to be strong. Okay. Now I might have my twin brother who is on the other side, and he may not be strong because he can only get 5 of those guys to lift up at one time. Okay. So strength is really your ability to recruit as many muscle fibers as you can at one time, to contract all at one time. And the more you can do that, the stronger you're going to be. Okay. Now that's strength. Okay. Muscle building, on the other hand, is completely different. Muscle building, like I said, is all about fatiguing the muscle fibers and recruiting as many as you can and not letting them fully recover. So for example, let's say we still have that table with those 10 guys around. Okay. Hypertrophy is like this. I say, hey, instead of a 300-pound table, let's say it's a 100-pound table. So now I don't need all 10 of those guys to lift. I just need 4 of those guys to lift. Okay. And it takes 5 minutes for them to fully recover. Remember, we use that stat. So let's say I say, okay, boom, 4 guys lift. So the 4 guys lift that table. There's 6 guys who aren't doing anything. They're just hanging out, eating their lunch, whatever, making fun of the guys that are lifting, right? So they're doing that stuff, right? So then those guys get tired. And then 60 seconds later, they're not fully recovered. Those guys that just lifted, they're not fully recovered. So I say, hey, we're going to lift this table again. But those guys are too tired to lift. So I have to go recruit 4 other guys that are standing around the table. Okay. So then I go and I let them lift. So now I have just recruited 8 guys to lift. And then 60 seconds later, I'm not letting them fully recover and I'm going to lift again. And now I have to go recruit 4 more guys to lift that table. And so hypertrophy, or building muscle, is all about how many guys I can get to tire out, and how many I can damage, and how many I can recruit to do this particular exercise. And so the more that I get tired, the more they grow back bigger and stronger during my recovery period. Okay. So I told you it's a little nerdy. Okay. So that is the big difference between strength and muscle building. They are 2 completely different goals. That's just two. I haven't even talked about the other ones. That's just two. Okay. If we go into endurance, that's a completely different methodology and a different way that physiologically that your body has to accomplish that. So again, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is trying to do all of that at one time. And physiologically, they're not all the same goals. Okay. They're all completely different, which is why we want to do phases. Okay. Now, another common mistake that I see people make when it comes to their weight training is I see people that they don't know how to measure their progress, not just physical progress, like as far as their body fat and their weight. They don't know that, but it's not just that, but they don't know what actual things to measure. Like if I'm in a strength building phase, how should I measure if I'm getting stronger? What are the forms of measurement that I can use, right? Oftentimes I'll have people that are in a muscle building phase, right? But then they're sad and upset and mad because they're not getting stronger, right? And they're looking at the wrong metric. If you're trying to build muscle and your workout is literally designed to build muscle, you're going by the sciences of what it takes to build muscle, okay? And you're not building muscle, then you should be sad. Okay. But if you're not building muscle, or if you are building muscle, but you're not gaining strength, well, it doesn't matter. The strength part doesn't matter. Okay. So I see a lot of people just not knowing what to measure, what metrics to use. Truthfully, they don't even know what phase they're in. They're just going in and working out for the hell of it, right? They're just doing stuff, which is a great first step. But when you're really starting to want to build muscle, okay, obviously we go back to the FIT principle, right? Frequency, intensity, time, type of exercise are the things that we want to look at. You know, if you're frequent and you're intense, right, then getting into the type of exercise or the last T and getting really, really technical with how you build muscle, that's super important if you're already frequent and you're already intense, okay? If you're doing those two things already, then you need to start applying real sciences, okay? Until you get consistent and get intense, right? Then knowing all this stuff may not be beneficial to you because you still just need to focus on being consistent with your workouts, okay? But if you're consistent, then you really need to get to a point where you're looking at the detail of your program, okay? If you've been working out for the last 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, okay, and you haven't seen the exact muscle building changes or the exact strength level changes that you have, then chances are you probably need to look at your workouts and say, hey, you know, what the hell is going on here? What am I doing? Am I even measuring the right metric? What kind of phase am I in? Am I even in the correct phase, or am I just changing my workouts for the hell of changing my workouts, right? All right, cool. So those are the common mistakes. So let me cover the common mistakes again. Never changing the workout. One, two, changing the workout too often. 3, doing random rep ranges. 4, trying to get stronger, build muscle, build endurance, do everything all within one program. And then not knowing what to measure, how to measure, what metrics to use when you're in a particular phase. Okay. And I guess the big thing is not using weight training phases, right? So those are the common mistakes that I see people make. Okay. So let's go ahead and get right into the different phases. Now, truthfully, I can probably come up with about 10 different phases, but there are about 7 common phases that you'll see a lot of trainers use. Now, I'm going to tell you kind of how to use these phases here in just a second, okay? But let me walk you through what the phases are. So first of all, every single phase that I'm talking about has a completely different dynamic, okay? There's going to be a different number of sets. There's going to be a different number of reps. There's going to be a different amount of rest. Your exercise split is going to be different depending on the phase that you're in. Your exercise selection is going to be different depending on what phase you're in, okay? I think I said your rest time. Your rest time is going to be different depending on what phase you're in. And more importantly, or another thing is your lifting speed is going to be different depending on what phase you're in, okay? So here are the phases, and there's just 7 basic phases. Number 1, there's a strength phase. We already talked about what strength is. In a strength phase, all you're trying to do is get stronger, okay? Number 2, there's what I call the hypertrophy phase or muscle building phase. Hypertrophy just means increase in muscle size. So increase in muscle size phase or muscle building phase, okay? Then there's an endurance phase where the goal is literally to have more endurance, right? So you can lift or do more repetitions, right? That's an endurance phase. Okay. There is the power phase. The power phase is more if you're doing sports or if you're doing powerlifting, right? Where you're trying to generate as much force as you possibly can. And usually in the power phases, it's all about, speed, right? You want to try to push as much weight, do as much as you can in the fastest rate possible. That's kind of the power phase, right? And it's usually complex movements, right? So a lot of football players and basketball players will use the power phase, okay? There is a tune-up phase, okay? A tune-up phase is what I normally suggest that people get into when they first start working out with me. And it's just exactly what it is. It's tuning their body up to start working out again. In fact, I just took 2.5 weeks and went and traveled, did Europe and Spain and Paris and stuff like that not too long ago. And I took 2.5 weeks from working out. And when I came back, I had to come back and do the tune-up phase, right? Where I have to just slowly get my body into working out again, okay? There is a big benefit to doing a tune-up phase. So any time that you take a week or 2 weeks off, you always need to do a tune-up phase. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a little bit longer, but you need to get your body back into working out again. So you need to do the tune-up phase, okay? There's a transition phase, okay? A transition phase is any time that let's say you're going from a strength phase to a hypertrophy phase, right? The transition phase is literally the phase that's in between that. You're transitioning from strength to hypertrophy, okay? So you need to have a particular style of workout that is going to help you transition into it, okay? And then the other phase, the last phase that we're going to just discuss here is the stability or balance phase. Okay. And this is where you might see somebody doing a lot of stability ball training. Maybe they are doing BOSU ball training. Maybe they're just trying to increase stability in their shoulders, increase stability in their hips, in their low back, in their core. They're trying to do something like that. Okay. And you put a lot of emphasis on selecting certain types of exercises that are going to do stability type movements. Okay. So these are the 7 basic common phases that you'll see a lot of people use. The last thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how to use these phases and, in a sense, how to develop and how long each phase should really last. Okay. So I'm going to give you a really basic example of how you can use these phases for your own particular workout. As you can tell, it's a pretty complicated thing. And I'll tell you, all of my clients, are following some system, some phase. I sit down way in advance and plan out exactly what it is. I'm monitoring their results on a monthly basis. I know exactly what's happening to their body. I know why their body is responding or not responding, right? It's not just their workout. It could be their nutrition, or it could be, that they were sick, or their habits. It could be something along that nature, but there's a lot of variables to understand, what to change and how to change. But I'm going to give you a basic example of how you can apply phases to your everyday training. Okay. All right. So let's just say that you are going to set up your weight training program. Okay. And let's say that you want to, you have 12 weeks. Okay. You have 12 weeks. Now let's do 36 weeks, 6 months. Okay. We'll put it in months. Okay. So let's say you have 6 months of training. Okay. The first thing that you've got to do is you've got to understand, what is my goal? Is my goal to really focus on, in this 6 months, do I want to focus really on getting stronger? Do I want to focus really on increasing my muscle size? Or is my goal to increase my endurance? Let's just stay with those 3. Okay. Just easy stuff. Okay. So let's say it's those 3. Now, if you say my goal is all of that, okay, my goal is to increase strength, increase hypertrophy, increase endurance, then you could just do something like, I'm going to do a strength phase for 8 weeks or 2 months. Then I'm going to do a hypertrophy phase for 2 months. And then I'm going to do an endurance phase for 2 months. Okay. And now you've been able to do all of them. That's one way to do it. Or let's just say that that's your goal, is to do all 3 of those. You could do, hey, I'm going to do strength for 1 month, and then I'm going to do hypertrophy for 1 month, and then I'm going to go back to strength for 1 month, and then I'm going to do endurance for 1 month, and then I'm going to do, you can mix and match. You get the idea of what I'm trying to do. Okay. Now I'll tell you this, that most people, okay, that come and see me, okay, they want to build muscle. right? They're like, hey man, I want to build muscle. What do I got to do? So I'll make it a little bit simpler to understand in a 3-month time period. Okay. If I know that their goal is to build muscle, then let's say I have 3 months to kind of build this little cycle. I will probably do 4 weeks or a month of muscle building, the hypertrophy phase. And then I might, depending on if they have good strength or not, or if they have good endurance or not, I might throw in, okay, we're going to do an endurance phase for a month. And then we're going to do the hypertrophy phase for a month, right? And so the reason why each phase, you never really want any phase to be longer than 6 weeks, again, because your body adapts to it, right? That's the whole point of doing it. So I would normally do 4 weeks of hypertrophy, 4 weeks of endurance, and 4 weeks of hypertrophy. And so in that 12-week time period, they were able to spend 8 weeks focused on muscle building and only 4 weeks doing endurance training or doing strength training, whatever we add in there. Okay. So that's a very, very easy way to do it. So the easiest thing that I normally suggest is for people to look at it at 3 months at a time. Okay. Especially if you're kind of coaching yourself and doing your own thing. If you don't want to have to figure all this stuff out, then, hire a coach, come to me. Obviously, I understand all this, but if you want to figure this thing out, then I always say, do it for 3 months at a time and say, okay, in 3 months, what is my true goal? Do I want to get stronger? Do I want to build more muscle? Do I want to build more endurance? Do I want to build more power? Do I want to build more stability? Okay. And when you ask that question, then you say, okay, well, for 2 of those 3 months, I'm going to focus on, let's just say that you want to build stability. So for 2 of those 3 months, you're going to do the stability phase. You'll do it at the beginning, the first 4 weeks or the first month, and you'll do it the last month. And that middle month, you can do, strength or hypertrophy or whatever you assess that you feel you need to do. Okay. So I have a question from Catherine. She says, so resting longer between sets allows you to lift more on the next set since you're already rested and have a higher energy capacity, and lets you build muscle because you're able to lift more and damage further. True, but not true. The more you rest, the more that your body will recover. So if you can go back and think about the strength analogy that I gave with the guys sitting around the table, if you rest for a long period of time, all those guys are going to recover and they're going to be able to lift that table again. Okay. But if you rest for shorter periods of time, all of those guys will not be able to recover. So you're going to have to go out and recruit more. So if you rest longer, you will be able to lift more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to build more muscle. Again, muscle building and strength building, they're 2 completely different protocols and 2 different physiological responses and way at attacking those goals. Okay. So just because you rest longer doesn't mean you're going to build more muscle. Okay. It'll mean that you'll probably be able to lift more weight, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to build more muscle. Okay. Now, again, this is according to the textbook. Okay. Some people do build muscle by resting longer. Okay. Not very common, but it could happen. This is the importance of making sure you're measuring your metrics. Okay. So remember this, just because you're getting stronger doesn't mean you're building more muscle. Okay. They're 2 totally different goals. Okay. If you're still a little confused about it, what I would suggest that you do is go check, go read, hey, what is the protocol for building muscle? What is the protocol for building strength? Right now, is there a way that you can do both at the same time? Yeah, a lot of times I will actually combine some of these phases and do what I call a strength and hypertrophy phase, but we're not 100% focused on strength and we're not 100% focused on hypertrophy. We're kind of splitting the difference, right? So sometimes I'll do a strength and hypertrophy phase, but if you're really focused, if you're really resting longer periods of time, all you're really doing is allowing yourself to lift more weight, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to build more muscle. Okay. All right, guys. Well, if you have any more questions, go ahead and feel free to comment below with whatever questions that you have. If you want to ask me a direct question, just send me a direct message and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about that. And as always, if you need more help with coaching, guys, go ahead and go to iFMCoaching.online and apply to be a coaching client. And we'll see if you fit our program and then see if you'll be a good fit and we're a good fit for you. We'll see you then.